Welcome back, everyone. This is a video series for a crash course in location data intelligence, and I'm Himanshi. In this video, we'll see the fourth block of the course, which is the last block about data analysis and location intelligence. So, in the previous videos, we explored the data, created some derived columns from the existing columns, and created time series visualization of the location data in QGIS. We will now start performing analysis of the data by getting more information using a set of coordinates. The learning goal for this block are first to build a spatiotemporal profile for locations visited by individuals. Second is to learn reverse geocoding from coordinates and changing it to locations. Third one is to identify home and work locations for one particular user. The fourth one is to explore trip characteristics like length and duration. To achieve these steps, we will learn about how to build a spatiotemporal profile of any location which is denoted by a set of coordinates. We will also see how to get more information about the point indicated by a set of coordinates, that is, to translate it to location. Then we'll explore the data for that user by the count of tweets per hour and per day and see if there are any patterns that we can understand from those. Then we'll analyze the data to determine the possible work in home locations for the Twitter user. Lastly, we'll look at certain trip characteristics, which are average distance and average time. Since we don't want to increase the complexity of the code or the execution time to get the results, we will further be filtering our dataset to just one user. This user has been randomly selected. So this user's user ID is 523, and we'll just filter out the tweets of this particular user from the tweets dataset and save it into tweets_1 dataset. This is how the dataset looks like after it has been filtered for that one user. It just has the user tweets of the user ID 523. Let's see how many tweets this user ID has. This user has 1066 tweets in the past 40 days. Now, please note that even though we are running this section for just one user, the code has been written in a manner that it is scalable, and the same code will run for multiple users as well. But the execution time will increase as the number of rows in the dataset increases. So if you add another user with more rows than this user, then the execution time of the code will probably become more than double. Now, just to get a general idea of the distribution of tweets over the day and through the week for this user, we will create plots which show us the count of tweets per hour as well as the count of tweets per day on each day of the week. Now, to compute the tweets for hour of the day, we'll be using the hour of the day column that we created in block 1, and we will first group the whole data set by the hour of the day column and then compute the count of the rows for each group, that is for each hour. So this is how we group by the data set based on hour of the day, and then we're just counting the number of rows for each group, that is for each hour, and then we're renaming the column to count. Let's see how it looks like. So this is how the data set looks like. So these are the hours, and this is the count of the tweets for each hour. What's interesting to note here is that there are no tweets for this user between 24 to 5 a.m. inclusive. This means that the user is not a late night user and he mostly tweets during the day. Now we create this plot using the Matplotlib library, and we will be using the data frame that we just created, and we'll plot that. So this is the plot. It seems like the user has more tweets during the day than at night. The most is at 11 11th hour and the 15th hour, which was also evident from the data that we saw before. Similarly, to get the tweets per day of the week, we will first group the whole dataset by day name and then compute the count of rows for each group. Now, this is what the resultant data will look like. We're using the same function that we used in the previous set of code, grouping by the day name and then getting a count, renaming the columns to count, and this is what the dataset looks like. Like before, we create this plot using Matplotlib by using the data frame grouped by day name and count as input. So this is the plot. It looks like the user is most active on Mondays and even Thursdays, and he is the least active on Sundays. Now in this section, we will try to identify the home and work locations of the subject from the trace GPS data. As per previous research work, the home location is defined as the zip code where the user most frequently spends his nighttime hours, which is between 19 to 8. And the work is defined as the zip code where the user spends most frequently his work time hours, which is defined as 9 to 18. We follow a series of steps to infer the home and work location. First, we will learn reverse geocoding. Then we'll classify hour of day as home or work. And then we'll classify day name as weekday or weekend. Later on, we'll identify the home and work locations by finding the max tweets at home and work hours. Now, to get started, we'll first install GeoPy. Reverse geocoding is the process of finding out a location or an address from a set of coordinates. We will perform this process on all the available coordinates in the dataset to get more information. We will use GeoPy Nomatum, which uses OpenStreetMap data to translate coordinates to addresses, cities, countries, and landmarks across the globe. Since it takes a while to gather all of this information, the service sometimes gets timed out, so there are some extra imports to handle that. So we'll use the rate limiter to handle that import, and to do the geocoding, we'll use the GeoPy geocoders. Let's execute this part of the code. We will go on along each step in reverse geocoding, but if you want to know more, this blog post is a great source of information for beginners. It contains everything in detail about this particular library and a lot of other functions that it can be done. So this is an exercise just to understand how reverse geocoding works. So these are some sample coordinates that we'll find the reverse geocoding results for. So we first need to specify the geocoding service to construct our own geocoder. So this is the geocoding service, which we have named as geocoder, and this is a rate limiter which will handle the timing out of the function. Then once we provide the coordinates with the geocoding service, the result is a dictionary of different features that we can access. So let's execute this code. This is the dictionary that can be accessed using the key and the value. This is the raw portion of just the address, but there are other variables in this as well. Now we'll see how to extract these other elements from the address dictionary. Now, since our reverse geocoder function accepts only the lat and long in string format as input, we will convert our existing data frame to lat and long and see how it looks. So we're basically appending the lat and the long using a comma and saving the results in a column which we're calling as lat underscore long, and then we'll see how it looks. Now that we have the input column ready, which was the lat and the long separated by a comma, we can start our reverse geocoder application to reverse geocode the coordinates of our data set. We will use the lambda and the apply function again. We will pass the lat long column that we created in the previous slide as input and save the raw data of our geocode into this column, geocode results. So this block has finished executing now. So the reverse geocode results are stored in this column, our geocode results that we created over here. And these are the first four rows of the data set. Since we can't see the whole results in the data frame, let's look at how one single result is structured. It is similar to what we saw in the previous exercise. So we're just using the first row to peek into the reverse geocode results. So we have a dictionary which contains a lot of objects with their values. For example, the OSM place ID, the lat and the long, even the display address as a whole. This is what we saw in the exercise before. We have attributes like city, county, state, postcode, and country associated with the address, which can be extracted separately after flattening the address dictionary. So yeah, this is a lot of information than what we actually need for our analysis. What we actually need is the components of the address, just the postcode actually. So we'll start to flatten the dictionary and try to save the components as columns for ease of processing. First, we'll start by flattening the geocode results to dictionary. This will save the objects, including the address dictionary, in different columns, and we'll save it to the tweets underscore one location. Then we'll flatten the address and save it tweets one underscore address. After that, we'll join the tweets1 underscore address with the original data frame in order to get the data together. Now, this might be a little confusing and complex, but we will display the resultant columns at every step so that it becomes more clearer. What this step is going to do is give a data frame with the primary objects and columns. So we have the place ID, the license, the OSM type, the OSM ID, lat long, display name, address, and the bounding box. So what we need from this is the address dictionary, which we'll again flatten further. So now that we have the address separately stored in a column, we'll again flatten the address dictionary and we'll save it to another data frame called tweets1 address, and then we'll print out the columns of that data frame. So this data frame has a lot of attributes like hamlet, city, county, state, postcode, even some other neighborhood related columns. Now that we have the flattened results save of the address, we will begin to join both the data frames that we obtained before. Since the index was preserved during the flattening process, we can directly just concatenate both the data frames together using their indexes and save the result in another data frame, which we'll call results.df. So this is the concat function. This is the tweets data frame, which is the original data frame, and this is the address data frame. So what we're doing is we're just saving the components of the address into the tweets1 data frame. So these are the columns that we now have. This has the original columns. User ID, long lat time, hour of day, day name, lat long, geocode results as well. And then these are the columns that were present in the address data frame. Now, since there are a lot more columns than we actually need, we'll only save the ones that we need in a new final data frame that we'll call data. So these are just the data frame that we'll create from the previous data frame. So we'll save the original columns of the tweet data frame and then save the address attributes obtained by flattening the address reverse geocode results. So this is the resultant data frame. This is the postcode. We have the state, county, city as well. And we have our original columns over here. Now, previously we saw that the hours at which a person is assumed to be at work is 9 to 18 in the morning, and the rest of the hours the user is assumed to be at home. So now what we'll do is we'll label the hour of the day as work or home depending on what its value is. So these are the hours that are classified as work time, and we'll again use the lambda and the apply function to perform this operation on the entire data frame and create a new column which is called is home time and save the results in that column. So this is our new column is home time. As you can see, the hour of the day is 9 over here. So since 9 is considered as work time, the data here in this home time column is work. But if it was something which was not included in this set, then it would have been home. Now, another assumption that we are taking moving forward is that the user is not at work on the weekends. So we will classify the day of the week as either weekday or weekend, depending on its value. So this is the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, and we'll check if the column is in this Saturday and Sunday, then we'll label it as weekend, otherwise we'll label it as weekday. So Tuesday is a weekday, so we have weekday here. Now, since we don't know where the user can be during the weekends, we will just remove those tweets from our dataset to get more concrete and accurate results. The user may or may not be at home. That's why we believe that it's best to remove the tweets to eliminate the ambiguity. So here we just save the tweets which have the is workday column as weekday. So that's our resultant data set. Now we'll identify the home and work locations. We talked about this before at the beginning of this block. As per some studies, user location with the most presences during the home time are home location and daytime are work locations. We will further be using postcode as the level of detail for address. Now to use this inference, we need to find the max presences of the user at home time and the max presences of the user at the work time. And then the last step is to find out the count of tweets at the home time and the postcode and then draw the conclusion. What we'll do now is we'll group the remaining data set by the is home time, whether it's home or work, and then by the postcodes. So we're grouping it by is home time column and by the postcode column, and then we're getting a count of the number of rows with those values. We are renaming the column to count again. So, for example, the first row indicates that the user has 4 tweets at home time and in this postcode. Now that we have the count for all the postcode, all we need to do is find the postcode with the max count at the home time and at the work time. So the max function can do the trick. So the user has maximum count at postcode 33896 at home time, and he has a maximum count of 34639 at work time. So these are the main conclusions that can be drawn out of our analysis. We clearly saw that the user has a lot more tweets during the the weekdays as compared to the weekends. The probable postcode where the user's workplace is located is 34639, and the probable postcode where the user's home is located is 33896. Now let's find out which cities these postcodes correspond to. Remember, we also have our city names in our original data set. So what we're going to do is just filter the data for these postcodes. So the county 34639 is Pasco and the 33896 is Osceola. Now this is the result that we have based on the points that the user has visited. The Osceola County is located at the top right, and the Pasco County is on the left bottom. The home and work locations look very separated from each other in this visual. Now, since we know that the user has been traveling a lot when he was tweeting, it would also be interesting to see the trip characteristics like the average distance traveled in between the tweets and the average time in between the tweets. So let's see how our data looks like. So we have all these columns here. To compute the distances, we'll use the Haversian distance. Uh, since the surface of the Earth is spherical, the distance traveled between 2 points is on the surface of the Earth, which is not a straight line. It is the distance traveled on the circumference of a circle, which is the Earth. So usually the Haversian distance is calculated when finding the distances between two coordinate points. And this is the function for calculating Haversian distance. If you just execute this function, this will get loaded into your Python script, and it can be used as a function by passing along these attributes. So it takes the coordinates of the 2 points between the distance is to be calculated. The flag to indicate whether the unit of measurement is radians and also the radius of the earth. Now, if the radius is 3958, the distance unit is miles. To get the distance in kilometers, the radius value should be 6371. We're going to be using the miles distance. First, what we'll do is we'll create a column that stores the previous coordinates for each tweet for the same user. If the user changes, the value of the previous lat and long should be null. This doesn't count for our case because we're using just one user. But if you're using the whole data set with multiple users, then you would encounter such a problem where the previous row has one user and the next row has another user. So the first row of each user should have the values of plat and plong as null. Next, we will compute the distance between two consecutive tweets for each tweet coordinate and its previous coordinate and store it in a column distance. So this is the code. Using shift, we can get the values of the previous row for this particular column. And we are then making the first plat and plong of every user as null when the user group changes. And later on, we are using the Haversian distance by passing the coordinates lat and long. One other column that we are computing is also the time difference. The time difference is the difference between the time of the previous tweet and the current tweet. So the previous row and the current row. So this 11 is computed by getting the difference between this value and this value. We will now compute the average distance for the whole distance column by grouping it by the user ID. The default mean function will work here and we'll group it by the user ID. So the user travels for 2.43 miles on average before tweeting again. Similarly, for the average time, we compute the time difference between every tweet and its previous tweet, and we stored it in the time difference column. Uh, then we compute the average time between the tweets by grouping it by the user ID and using the same mean function on the time difference column. So the user has a difference of 158 seconds before he tweets again, an average difference of 158 seconds. So that was it for the location analysis. But remember, uh, there are certain ethics that revolve around performing analysis on location data. So just a reminder, what should we do if you are creating an application that collects data? To avoid conflicts, just be clear about not only what type of data that you will be collecting, but also about how you will be using it. Because if you plan to sell users' data, you have to be sure that you are specifying that in your user agreement. And if someone wants to opt out of your application, it should be easy to do that. The UI should be made such that it's very easily available and it can be spotted in just a moment of time. You should also think of the implications if there is a data breach for your application. What would happen if there is an attack on security of your system? The data of the users, which is personal to them, should not be leaked. And for that, data encryption should be practiced using cybersecurity methods. On this note, I would like to conclude this video series and say thank you to everyone who's watching it. Please feel free to email us for feedback on our email IDs mentioned here. I hope you all enjoyed this session and learned something new and interesting. I'd also like to mention that this material was developed with the funding from NSF under the guidance of Dr. Vanessa. I would also like to thank the authors of the blog posts that have been referred in this video series for installations and reverse geocoding notes. Thank you.